Welcome everyone. Welcome to the CUX Hot or Not, already the 5th edition in the sessions all about the future of system engineering. My name is Martine Dubling and I'm one of the organizers of this event and I will be your host of today. We have a beautiful keynote speaker and we have some house rules to say to you, is that if you have any questions during the presentations, please leave them in the chat. We also have the opportunity to get you live into the studio. We will give you a call. Let us know if you want to be live in the studio, and we will have you here. You can ask your questions directly to my colleagues and the presentators over here. So again, welcome to the CUX Technologies Hot or Not. It's all about servitization, and my colleague Arend-Jan will tell you everything about that. Arend-Jan.
Thank you, Martine. So my name is Arend-Jan Beltman, and today I will bring you the technical part, and I will glue, so to say, the topic to, at the end, connected at Nijssen. So what is it all about? It's about the digital transformation and the impact on the future of system engineering. So this is already the 5th episode of this cycle, and maybe it's good that we first wrap up the previous episodes and get on the same page together. And then I will introduce you to Professor at Nijssen, who will tell us about servitization and why it is connected to system engineering. So it all started, I think, in the 1st of July last year, and Jim Stolze explained to us that due to the digital transformation, a lot of opportunities are there in the field of solutions for customers. But in the same session, Robert Hendriksen of CUX also explained that the same trend of digital transformation will also affect us system engineer in the way how we develop our product. So that is in the heart of this picture. But very important, and also with respect to the context of today, the fact that our machines are becoming more and more digital also enables us to look into it and check whether the performance is okay and organize a lot of data and information for our customers. And that will be an important topic of today. Right. So, in order to explain artificial intelligence in the context of product creation, we invited Jan Bos. It was in September, I believe, and he, brought a marvelous speech on the fact that we see that the added values of a product will more and more move towards software and, data of systems, as you can see. I want to emphasize that in the heart, there is still this mechanical enabler, but the added value is more and more generated from software to data to artificial intelligence. So, if it is possible, make a solution which is built out of software so that it introduces maximum flexibility. And what he emphasizes is that, there's a lot of effort going on creating models and training them, but, the application-specific part is at the end of this graph. And you need an interesting ecosystem to make tailored solutions for AI applications. That's what he mentioned. So I invited a few speakers to help us out and to explain more about this topic on system engineering. But then, the question arises, what actually is system engineering? So let's introduce this definition. It's about skills and methods to handle technology and manage the domain's specific complexity with appropriate tool. And there we have our 4, themes we addressed after the 1st of September. So first of all, we started with a topic on methods. Then we talked about management. And today we talk about a specific domain on the field of servitization. And we will conclude about tools. So, skills and method. I invited someone of the University of Eindhoven to talk about the fact that we need this ecosystem. And recently, AC was introduced, and Giorgio Angelis brought us an overview what is on their roadmap. And what I find surprising is that technologies or methods we already apply, customized solutions like Spotify are now being transferred to the high-tech equipment world, so to say. And AC is helping us there. So we used to talk about data science. Nowadays, we talk about artificial engineering, and that means that we want to transform data into value, into meaning, so to say. What Angelo explained is that our current modeling tools will be more complex and will be more interwoven with artificial intelligence kind of methodologies. And he demonstrated that in Eindhoven region already many ecosystems are rising on the topic of artificial intelligence for smart systems. So the question arises, how do you manage such a creation process with that many complex tools and technologies? That's why I ask Wouter Leijbrand to give us a heads up in that domain. Where are we confronted with, and which tools will help us to get through this big challenge? So I took a few slides. So first of all, he explained us what complexity actually is, and what he explained is that the relationship cause and effect can only be perceived in retrospect. So what he actually is saying, so hindsight, you can see whether a solution is really valuable. And that relates to the picture of Robert saying, at the end, when you introduce a product and you start monitoring it, you will learn quite a lot of information, which is very valuable for the next generation. So Wouter also explained that there is a kind of, issue between the conventional ways of engineering, so the V model at the left side, and the ways the managers would like to direct a project. Managers, they're directing risks, and while the engineers really want be creative. So he put many slides about that. This one also explains in more detail this this tension, he calls it. The answer is that all of us should be aware of the fact that this tension simply is there. So it starts with this awareness with all of us, and in particular, of course, our managers, because they will probably better understand certain issues when they understand the context of this tension. So, and the other thing he brought us is that we should think of advanced tools that help us, so both the system engineer as well as the project manager and all the other stakeholders to have a view on the majority of a project. So not only at the front with the stakeholders, but also at the end, so at the R from the Kafka model. All right, once you have introduced such a nice complex system, you can't just send it to your customer and give him a manual and say, good luck with it. You need more than that only. And the other side, like I explained, there's a lot of information in this machine. It generates a lot of data, which is, for once, reusable to improve your next generations of machines. So that was emphasized during our interview. So at the 1st of September, I believe, we had this survey, and many of you said, hey, maybe we should think of something as a service in our product. And in order to find the speaker on this topic, I approached John van Ginkel from Link magazine. And why is that? I found an interesting article of the European Supply Chain Forum, which says that servitization is key to strengthening the competition position companies have. So, okay, servitization, what is it about? So I checked out their website. John van Ginkel informed me about it. And servitization is exactly about this thing that if you make a complex machine, you really want to be connected to that equipment also when it is at the customer. There's much more to gain there. And that is why I was looking for a keynote speaker of today that, kind of can bring me this landscape of opportunities. And via John, I was introduced to a professor at Nijssen. He's one of the initiators of this servitization community. The servitization community, as of from 2019, I believe, is part of the ESCF, as I believe. And so I'm very pleased to introduce you to Ed Nijssen, professor of marketing at the Innovation, Technology, Entrepreneurship and Marketing group of the School of Industrial Engineering of the Eindhoven University. Professor Nijssen holds a PhD from Tilburg University, and his research interests focus on marketing and sales of new product, service marketing, entrepreneurship, and international marketing research. So a lot of marketing. For most system engineer, maybe you think, is that the speaker that is compatible? I'm sure he will convince you in less than a few minutes from now. He has published over 80 articles on this subject, and he is the author of Entrepreneurial Marketing and co-author, I believe, on Marketing Strategy from Noordhoff. So Ed, please make a bridge from high-tech product and how the customer can use it.
Thank you, Arnd-Jan. Thank you for this nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me here in this important SUE lecture series as a keynote. It's a pleasure. It's also a pleasure here to be in this nice studio. Normally I sit as the audience at home watching at my little screen. I've been doing that for a whole year. And actually that has given way to a whole new industry almost, because people are looking at their screens and saying, oh, look at these wrinkles. And so I read in the Economist that actually the cosmetics branch is really working well. And even plastic surgery is enjoying a boost. I think the market is up by 10% in the US and even 20% in France. Fortunately, I work in academia, and there I noticed that these looks are a little bit less important. Fortunately, we can now go to the hairdressers again and look a little bit better, because when I was watching my colleagues on the screens, they started looking more and more like Neanderthalers, like almost cavemen, and less women actually, because the women actually, they took better care, I guess, of themselves than the men. I also had colleagues actually who put on weight, and one colleague actually, Joost, he put his bicycle in front of a TV with a web camera. He played on the television, and that was his sort of home trainer. But given the fact that I didn't see him lose weight over the next couple of weeks, I then inquired whether he maybe had an e-bike actually that he was using for that purpose. But as I mentioned, there is a lot of development, and I am aware that you're sitting at home watching this, and I hope we have an enjoyable ride for this presentation. The topic is servitization, and really it's about companies moving from selling products to selling services to actually selling product service systems and complete solutions. That's what I would like to explore with you, and to look at some organizational issues that are involved and how to deal with it. But let's first define actually the topic. This is my agenda, so we'll start with a definition, then look at different types of offerings, look at the motivation for firms to move in this direction, what are the benefits, but also probably what are the costs that are involved. We look at some organizational issues, because it's really about change management. This is If you want to summarize it, it's really a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we should also look at the commercial side of the firm. Arend-Jan already mentioned that. A lot of firms see it more as a technical challenge, but selling solutions is very different from selling products. And that's what we need to look at also. And then, of course, and we do that using Mentimeter, we will have to tie it back to your area, your discipline. What does it mean for your field? Okay, so servitization, it's really this transformation from basic products and services to more integrated solutions. And we also call that hybrid offerings. And it is rooted in a product service system that is actually enabled by digitalization, by Internet of Things. Examples are, well, some famous examples are of course Rolls-Royce, the power by the hour, but also Xerox, and you see some other Dutch companies too, and the Swedish companies, but also ASML has recently introduced paper waiver. And also there, actually, they were struggling because they had simply decided that companies should pay, I think, something like 13 euros per waiver, and they did not really anticipate so much that there's different types of customers that have their machines to turn out to the masses and that are delivering much more specialized output. So let's look at some of these things in more detail. Here a little slide that shows it in an agricultural setting, and we can, of course, have a tractor, and we can make that more smart by putting all kinds of software in it. We know actually from the car industry that nowadays a car has a lot of digital stuff in it, maybe even more than good for it is. But then we can actually also make it connected with all kinds of other things. The more interesting thing actually when it becomes a product service system or integrated actually for the farmer with the feeding system, with the knowledge about climate and predictions about rain. This switch actually also is accompanied by performance contracts, because it means, as we will see, that the supplier is not just giving you or selling to you the product, also the extra services are sold, and in the end, actually, the whole solution is sold, and they promise you, actually, that you can, for instance, maybe pay for the output. If we then continue with the illustration, here we see it again in an agricultural setting. For instance, we can have a milking robot, which you see at the top. We can have a feeding robot, which you see at the bottom. There's even, as I put there, Lely is selling these kind of total solutions, but we have also companies that sell smaller digital equipment, like Connectera. It's a company that puts a sensor around the neck of a cow, so it's like a Fitbit for the cow. And based on analyzing the data, based on analyzing the walk and the talk, you could say, of the cow, the farmer will get alerts on which cows to watch. Because nowadays herds are so big that is difficult to keep track of. The interesting thing, of course, in the case of a total solution, like in the case of Lely, is that they integrate all these efforts like we saw in the previous slide. If we then look at these different services, we can actually divide it into two. We can actually, what we see in this pyramid, we see on the left-hand side a more product-oriented firm, and on the right-hand side a more customer process-oriented perspective. And we see different levels. And at the first level, it's more about input. The focus on the value proposition of the firm is more, we will provide you with input, so we'll deliver a tractor to your doorstep, and then you're on your own. Figure it out as a farmer what to do. The second level is actually where we add services to it. So if it breaks down, we come and repair it for you. And this will guarantee that your business has continuation. And the final level would be actually where we really take care of everything, where we actually can almost take over the farm, and the farmer could be on the Bahamas. But for illustrative purposes, let's look at two of the extremes. We'll look at the bottom left side, of the product and that is supplied, and then you're on your own. And we look at the very top side, where actually it's completely integrated with the customer's process, and where we really have a mobility service. Let's look at 2 videos.
Hi, this is Kelly from Car Data Video, and today we're going to have a history lesson. Of all the automobiles that have ever been designed and built in the world, there's one that stands out as most significant above them all, and that's the Model T Ford. The Model T introduced mass production and single-handedly brought us from a horse and buggy level of technology to one where we had machines that were run by gasoline engines. Using a moving assembly line, Henry Ford was able to build these things in about 1/10 the time it took to build other vehicles by hand previous to the Model T. The Model Ts were simple, they were rugged, they were cheap, and as Henry Ford used to say, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. When they were first introduced in 1909, they sold for $950, which doesn't sound like much to us today. Back then, that was quite a lot of money. Henry Ford cleverly paid his employees $5 a day, which back then was a huge amount of money compared to other jobs that they could get. He also reduced their workday from 9 to 8 hours, but again, by doing that, he could have 3 production shifts working and hence build cars around the clock. All of this was going on at a time of economic difficulty and transition, and so the result of this is people would come from all over the country to get jobs working in Detroit at the auto factories, and of course their job of choice was with Ford. Production of the Model A's went for 19 years, from 1908 to 1928, and the last ones that were built that weren't very much different from the very first ones that he originally produced. They had wooden spoked wheels with metal rims pressed on them. You can see here what they're doing is hand filing the spokes to make them smooth so they can be painted. The engine was a ridiculously simple, by today's standard and light, 177 cubic inch, which is 2.9 liter, 4-cylinder engine, which produced 20 horsepower. The vehicle weighed about 1,200 pounds, depending on which body style you got, and would be good for about 40 to 45 mile an hour top speed, and it had 2 forward gears. The assembly line was split so that the frame and the wheels and tires and everything were assembled at one point, and then the bodies were assembled separately, and then at one point the body would be dropped onto the frame. Over the years, an enormous number of body styles were created. You had a touring car, a roadster pickup, a ton truck, a closed cab ton truck, a coupe, a 2-door, a 4-door, a center door, a station wagon, and a convertible. Pretty versatile vehicle. Eventually the Model T was replaced by a Model A, which was a modernized, stylized version of a vehicle that looked quite the same. Highland Park was the first modern assembly plant, and is where the Model Ts were produced. And just like today, when they're done being assembled, they're driven off the assembly line. But look at these vehicles as they come out, and look at all the different body styles, many of which we read, and these are all just different versions of Model Ts. Finally, after 19 years of production, Henry Ford had actually built almost 15.5 million Model Ts, and they were by far the most popular and most plentiful vehicle on the road. And here you can see the assembly of the 15 millionth, which is a 4-door convertible model. And as you can see, they've added some paint colors other than just black, and that actually is Henry Ford there driving off the assembly line and driving in that 15 millionth Model T Ford. This particular one hadn't gone through final assembly quality control. You can see how Henry had to give a little nudge there to get it shut properly. To start a Model T, you had to hand crank it, but because the engine wasn't very big and it was low compression, all it would take was about a half a turn and it would fire right up. Back then, riding in a car was an occasion. It was a big excursion. It was fun. Just the ride itself was quite entertaining. Keep in mind that going somewhere in a car was probably 10 times faster than going by horse or buggy, which is what they were accustomed to before. Back then, cities were just developing, and most of the roads were terrible, especially the country roads. And so the Model T had to be built in such a way where it could handle anything, all the way from no road to city roads, and it actually did a very good job of that. Most of the country roads were mud roads or dirt roads, and in the city there was no snow plows. If it flooded, you had to ford it, and so you just had to deal with all the stuff, and the Model T was miraculous at being able to handle almost any road condition you could imagine. So here you've got the original Ford Model T, the great-great-great-grandparent of most every car you see on the road today. This is Kelly from Car Data Video.
Well, so this is really about the ultimate product, you could say. I don't know how you feel when watching this video, but the car I currently drive, which is a brand new car, I don't think it's as versatile as this one. And you almost start to think maybe the car industry has over-engineered the car, given the fact that there's so much software in there nowadays. So maybe we should rethink that. But now let's look actually at the other side of our pyramid, at the top part. Let's look at the next video. It is all about mobility and about offering customers a solution. So this is very interesting, these mobility services. So they plan your whole trip. They can give you a car, they can give you a scooter, and they have contracts with all these sort of maybe stakeholders or providers and pay them a fee. If again you would read The Economist, they noticed that actually a number of these companies that work with these apps are worth more than a lot of car companies like Volkswagen or Mercedes. So this shows actually where this is going. And in fact, they predict that in the next 10 years, these apps will take over about 40% of the whole market. And it's really billions worth of dollars. And that explains the valuation of this kind of companies. So if we now look at our matrix, so we have on the two extremes on the left-hand side, we have our Ford automobile, the car that is given to you, and you're on your way. And at the other side, on the other extreme, a much more customer-focused process. They really offer you a complete integrated solution. But we can now also fill in the other options that we have. Apart from the car, of course, we can also offer you service. We can offer you actually an extensive service program, if you like, to make sure that you're on the road and keep driving. So these mobility services, but it could even extend to car rental services. On the more customer process side, you can think of a driver learning how to drive, or it could be, for instance, a company that comes to wash your car at home. So you don't have to change your agenda. Everything happens simply on your doorstep. And finally, of course, we have a complete, even further developed service, complete integrated with external stakeholders to offer you this full mobility option. Okay, let's now first do some Mentimeter questions so that we can reflect on some of these things, and the main questions will be on how you look at these trends.
Yes.
Yep.
So all, we would like to invite you to go to the website on your screen or use the QR code to get into the Mentimeter questions. And I will put the first question on the screen. So the question is, what is the impact of servitization trend? More sensors, better data usage, new ideas for new product and services, optimizing our and customer processes, or emerging one of new business models? Please, may we have your votes?
And I think people can choose more options. Eh? Yeah.
And if you have any questions left about this topic, or do you want to discuss later on during the dialogue session about these questions, please leave your name in the chat and leave your question in the chat, and we will get back to you live in the studio. Not seeing any answers coming in yet. Is it working? Oh, we have
Yeah, people simply have to go to the Mentimeter in their web browser.
yes.
And then type in the code, and then they should be able to vote.
I know there is a small delay between questions and answers, but I'm looking
Well,
at
normally
the...
with students, they are pretty quick, but here we have to wait.
So what do you expect, Ed? Which one will have the highest rating?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the system engineer, so...
I would have voted for emerging of new business models.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Yeah. I don't think this is working.
No?
No.
Could I get any feedback?
Now maybe we just continue with the presentation, and the technical guys can take a look at what
Yes,
happening
we
here.
will.
Let's skip it.
So we skip the second question then. We go back to the presentation where Ed will continue his story, and we will have a look about what is happening with the quiz.
Yes, thank you. The idea behind the question was, of course, it affects all these areas, but most in particular, of course, it offers the opportunity for new business models. That's what we specifically see with these mobility services, for instance, these solutions that are being provided. They really change the name of the game. But this brings us to the issue: why would companies be interested in this servitization trend and to use digitalization to create product service systems and these solutions? Well, first of all, it brings, of course, you closer to the customer. We see that it's not just selling the product, it's really learning about the customer process and being close to the customer. And of course, when you're close to the customer, you also can better maybe launch new products even. The second is that the focus becomes much more on creating value, and it helps you move away from, let's say, the commodity magnet. If you're in a slow-growing market, it gives you new opportunities for growth. The third thing is that you have better chances of selling things, because just think about it. If in the case of Henry Ford, you just sell the car and that's it, then you only make a sale every so many years. If you start adding services, you first of all have extra income, but it also brings other options, like we saw indeed with, for instance, offering the rentals or even lease contracts and so on. So this repetition is really an important element, and also the element that we actually see there is the stable continuous revenue stream. Particularly if you have a service that you sell sort of like every year for continuation, or if you have a subscription type of model, you have a continuous stream of income. And that, of course, provides stability to your firm. So there's clearly impact to the product and service, and this is why people really look at these more integrated services. The only thing, of course, is if you start developing such a product service system, it will require a major initial investment. The other thing that it really impacts is the way that your company is thinking, because it means that in contrast to simply developing a product and bringing it to the customer, you really have to understand the customer's processes and make sure of a sort of seamless integration of your solution with the customer. That means that you need a customer-oriented culture, in fact. It's a complete different way of thinking. And that is also why I mentioned that it's rather a marathon than a sprint. Let's have some further or look at more developments and trends. Let's first actually look at what it does with the impact of services that you add to the firm on firm value. And also let's look at what kind of service intensity that you actually need. How does that work for your strategy of the firm? And what is the impact of environmental factors, in fact? So let's look at this. There has been a nice piece of research by some people where they analyzed American service manufacturing firms. And what they find actually, the impact on firm value, which you see on the vertical axis, you see it here, you see it here, is that with increasing servitization ratio within your firm, so if you start adding more services and get more revenue from these services, we see a kind of a U-shaped curve. So this means that, in fact, when you begin with your services, there's a learning curve, and you have to make investments, which actually has a negative effect on your revenue streams or on your profits, actually, and also on the firm value. But once you reach sort of like a 30% level, then actually there will be an upward swing from this whole learning process. The other thing is what we see is, or what this research notes, is the need for related services. So it's not remote services in the sense of remote from the kind of products that you sell. They really should be integrated with your core business. And the services that you then develop should again be sort of related. It's more like a sort of technology trajectory. If you follow that strategy, actually it has a very strong or much stronger positive impact on your firm value than if you have low related services, so a much more diversified service portfolio. Further, you benefit, of course, from more slack resources, which means actually the sort of surplus resources that you have actually to make this investment. But as we see, the effect is less strong. So these are two of those conclusions. And the other two important observations are that this is really a good strategy in a low growth industry, and an industry that maybe is turbulent, but actually where you have also, to a certain extent, a more mature technology that is infused with this digitalization. And what we see then is that for these low growth industries and with this high turbulence, the effects on firm value are much more positive. So firms in mature, low growth and operating in turbulent industries, they see the most positive effects, in fact. So for instance, in the car industry, in that sense, it's a good idea. So the managerial implication is that there's a clear positive impact, and managers should recognize that, of this servitization trend on firm value. But what it does require is a meaningful investment and at least creating sort of like a 30% share in the firm's sales, so to say. And it should be close to the core of the business. You may also look at your industry, and low or an industry where growth is sluggish, you could really use this to stand out from the crowd and wow customers with your solutions. and where there's more volatility. Then let's go back to our pyramid. And of course, then there's different strategies that a firm can follow. If you are a producer of goods, you can, of course, follow the strategy in the vertical way to add services. First, sort of more the maintenance services, and then the more advanced services. Or you could actually try to immediately switch, and try to make complete solutions for your customer by linking or understanding the customer's business process and trying to make solutions for that. But you have to be aware that if you make that transition, you really have to understand the installed base very well, because that's what you have to leverage on. And what we see actually with the companies that we work with, they often say that they have a lot of data and that they know a lot about their customers. But actually, when we talk about their installed base, it is less obvious that they have all the information required. And this also has to do with a cultural change that you need. If you move away from product-centered and become service-centered, you really need to understand the customer, and you really need to understand the customer's business processes, but also your own installed base to manage that to manage it well across the product lifecycle. The better way very often than to create these new services is to do that in a separate organization because of this cultural change that needs to be accomplished. In this sense, it's also important, the service paradox. What do we mean by that? It means actually that very often companies start investing in these solutions, but then actually they find that they do not resonate with customers. A possible cause for that is, in fact, in the round tables that we organize, we see that very often the engineers, they simply talk about the customer. Oops, we're going a little bit too fast. We simply talk about the customer, and rather than that, they differentiate between different segments, because, of course, these solutions are not for all customers in the market. They are just for a part of the market. And to create these solutions and then expect that everyone will be happy and immediately adopt them is, of course, foolish. This really takes time, and you really need to understand the customer, and upscaling is a big issue and needs to be planned carefully. In the next slide, I took from an article that appeared in 2019, and what you see is actually, you see it in the right-hand corner. This is about IoT-enabled business models. And in the red, on the horizontal axis, you see the inhibitors, the problems that organizations face. And on the vertical axis, we see these different business models. And they go from simple add-ons, but including a sharing business model, to the business model on that is use-based or a complete solution. And what the authors have done, in fact, here is they printed the number of articles that address and discuss these inhibitors, that discuss these managerial challenges that there are. And the light green refers to a sort of limited number of articles that is addressing it, and the dark green refers to a lot of articles that are addressing it. So what we see, in fact, is that as soon as you start adding these services, you run into privacy issues with customers and data security issues that you have to address. And this is also part, actually, of course, of the more advanced business models. Then there is collaboration, which is clearly an issue with the sharing business models, but that's definitely also, again, with the solution-oriented business models. The data management is a challenge. And then there's general inhibitors, which refer to your technical knowledge, for instance, on digitalization. Imagine that if you are a manufacturing company, you have people in mechanical engineering, but that's very different from, of course, ICT and integrating these digital solutions with your product. And that is something to think about. Other challenges are, of course, the capital investment and, of course, linking well to customer needs. And what we see actually here is that, as I mentioned, that with these simple add-ons, it may be the privacy issues, but we see, of course, with the solution-oriented business models, it actually addresses all these issues. You will face all these challenges, in fact, and particularly also the internal and external collaboration with your partners to create these solutions. In that sense, I want to also share this slide with you. I already mentioned that very often companies develop solutions but have not really thought that carefully about the customer. And this research is interesting because they had two focus groups, one with providers we see in the table, we see it here, and customers, and they asked what kind of risks that they perceived. Did they see privacy risk? Did they see functional risk? Did they see psychological risk? And we see that providers talk almost not about functional risk, but this is very much on the mind of customers. 29 times they mentioned it. Providers only mentioned it once. Psychological risk. The customers are very worried. Not just will everything work, but will everything come together? And how will I look as a manager if this fails? So in that sense, it is important to realize that you may create a solution, but customers have a different perspective on this, and this needs to be managed. And solutions, if you sell also solutions, if you sell products, you very often, the salesperson will give the service for free, but if you sell solutions, actually the service is the product. And this also then should reduce the risk, and that means that it should be sold to someone higher up in the organization that really appreciates that. But even then we see that there's clear differences in perspective. This sales process indeed is very different. It is less transactional, less focused on the product. We see it here depicted as a process of requirements definition, customer customization and integration and deployment, but also post-deployment. So also to keep the relationship going and do this additional selling of and cross-selling of products. Of course, for a system engineer, this may seem more natural because of the whole Scrum idea, maybe. But this should then also be applied to sales and the way you deal with customers there. We were almost reaching now the end. I'm aware that in one of the previous sessions, you talked about the development process and how that is changing and how it is becoming more, requiring more a holistic view based on these developments. There have, of course, been case studies, and here we see sort of this organizational issue depicted in a very simple way. First of all, we see that everything becomes more modular. We got product modules, we got service modules, and information modules, and these can be used to make different configurations. This is, of course, in basic, the platform and the product service system that we have been talking about. And it's engineered there in the middle, engineered by the back end, by the platform orchestrator, and maybe you play an important role in that. And we see sort of this also depicted as a process. But there's also a front end. And what this research, for instance, finds is that in this development process, very often it is a little bit over the wall. We see the back-end people creating the solution with all these modules and then just handing it over to the commercial people and say, well, you figure it out. And they have to figure out the different configurations for the customers. But of course, this needs to be much more integrated to make this into a success. To give you a small example of this also, we did a little piece of research with Philips Electronics before they actually spun out their lighting division, and they asked to study their product platform architecture and to give more advice on how to guide the management. And originally the research would completely focus on the engineers, on how that should be managed. In the end, in fact, the project was not about that. It was really about the interaction of the engineers with the commercial people. And what we saw was that really the commercial people need more understanding of the platform and the technical issues, and the platform architects need to understand more about the market and about customers. If that happens, the integration goes more naturally, and this process that we just saw stands a better chance of success, of a better solution in the end. So in that sense, it links back to this slide from Robert Hendricks that was discussed in one of the previous sessions, and we can use it for some Mentimeter questions in a minute. But this to already put you up for that. Let me finish by this presentation by doing the payoff and doing some conclusions. I think that this servitization trend based on digitalization and IoT is a very important trend. It's affecting a lot of businesses. But it requires serious upfront investment and really management commitment. And why is that? Because it requires a serious cultural change. It requires a service-oriented culture to understand the customer's business processes, to not just create a solution and then say, oh, here it is. No, but to make sure that it also works in the context of the customer and that the work routines have been adapted and that the people have been trained to enjoy it. I mean, that is really creating a solution rather than just the possibility of a solution. It requires changing also from product selling to solution selling, because it is not just happening in the firm, it is happening with customers, and also the commercial part of the firm really has to be integrated and connected to this development. Otherwise, it will not work. The final thing is, it is not about a technology. It is about all these things together, and that creates a solution. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ed. So, this whole cycle is about the future of system engineering. And if it brings one thing, it is that the future is holistic. That's in all the keynotes we had, there is this continuously emphasizing that you have to do it together. Even the management part, as Wouter Leijbrand explained, the managers and the system engineers should, better understand each other and also understand that they don't understand each other, which is okay. And in this case, sales also comes around. So more collaboration with sales.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a very challenging time, but very often. But I don't know how you experience it. That's why I thought the film with Ford was an interesting one. Is when with a lot of products but this is from a consumer perspective. But I think it also to some extent relates to other areas. I sometimes wonder. Who made these products, and did they ever try them themselves? I mentioned my car. I think I can say it. It's a Mercedes. It's my 20-year-old Mercedes. Everything was functional. Many things were were less digitalized. But for instance, you could lower the back seat simply in a mechanical way. Now it has a button. In fact, maybe this is an interesting thing. The button didn't work. Yeah. The garage spent a lot of time finding out what it was. I think they spent four hours. It turned out to be that it was the safety belt from the dog that I had stuck in. But it was not in a manual. But it's a safety feature. It makes sense. Yeah. But it shows that. But even if it would be broken, how would I get it's a station wagon. How would I get the back seat lower?
So there's still a lot to do. And I can recall that Jan Bosch was mentioning it too, that he had one or two slides about this topic that, we bring up too much of functionality where customers are not really, are not waiting for, so to say. And maybe that's a nice bridge to one of your slides on this psychological thing. So customers is it because they are kind of, they feel that they're depending on this solution. While if you buy a product, then you have more control, at least the feeling of more control. Is it in that area? Can you elaborate a little bit more about it? Because I
think we all have, as customers, these layman theories, and we know that if a seller shows up on your doorstep, you go like, oh, wait a minute, this must be sort of like a salesperson or a marketing person, and I'm not sure that this will deliver on promise. But actually, in a business setting, of course, it's not about the marketing person, because it is what the company as a whole made also, the solution that it's offering. And that means also that the company as a whole has to sort of understand the customer's processes and solve that problem that they have. And I think that with your very good customers, your sort of lead customers, you should look at their processes and try to enhance these processes. And then I think you should not oversell what you're trying to do. And overselling is something that happens a lot, I think. But I think in the long run, if you're really a business partner, you don't want to oversell, but you want to set challenging goals and to work towards that. That is, I think, what should be the... and by connecting then also the marketing people, we should not have them oversell it.
So when we project servitization to CX as a service company, I think then there's also very interesting stuff that, you know, in the previous episodes we addressed the Kafka model of Gerrit Müller, and there at the C is the customer. So you as an architect are very interested in what the customer really, you know, dreams of, and you should know that we as CX are then, you know, talking with the OEMs that introduce those products. I think that one of the key takeaways today is that those engineers really should be focused on not only what the customers or our customer wants, but also their customer.
Correct.
And that's also an important key takeaway I'd like to emphasize in this way. Martina.
Yeah, I think we still have 2 questions left in the Menti, right? Maybe the next slide. Oh yeah. Then we have the question now, when should sales be involved in the development process? So is that more in the traditional, still at the end? Or should we sell it up front? It requires development and integration of services portfolio, requires much more holistic approach. We would like to know your opinion about this, and we will get back to you in the dialogue session.
Yeah, so that, I guess this takes a 20-second...
That's the technical solution, the 20-second delay.
Yeah, the delay.
Nothing to worry about. We got the answers of the first 2 questions.
Yeah, so I'm wondering,
we have our input.
Can we now, while they are voting, move forward to the next one, or do we have to wait?
We wait for a couple of seconds.
Yeah, we have to wait for
if you want to talk, you can. And we have some people who want to be live in the studio. So they are waiting for us. So if you are ready for the first questions...
So, yeah,
let us know. But
yeah, so maybe there's this huge discrepancy between, you know, making a product like a car of the T-Ford and then the service you bring. It's a very now it probably will be a bumpy road. Talking about the video is obvious, or bumpy roads, but getting there will be a bumpy road. When you look at the Eindhoven region, which type of let's say OEMers or products, maybe in that area, are good candidates to become servitized. And you showed the mobility thing. Are there any other examples that, particularly in this Eindhoven region, which maybe are compatible for it?
Oh, I think, of course, Van der Lande would be a good option. I remember that they actually once thought about picking up your suitcase at home and shipping it. But there's some snacks there because they want the suitcase to be in the same plane as you, so you don't blow up other people, but at least including yourself, let's say. But also, of course, we see it in the DAF trucks and so on. We know it also from Michelin, that they sort of regroove their tires. But for DAF, for instance, where I also saw it is that they even had at a lower level for selling spare parts, that they had a sort of overall program. And it was completely integrated that their customers, no matter where their truck breaks down, always has the lowest price on the parts.
Okay.
And they only get built once a month, and it's all automated. So maybe that doesn't look so sophisticated, but it's of course a first step towards those kind of things. And they were actually also working with car computers that would monitor the driving style and those kind of things. But of course, they also have the problem then of customers adopting it. In fact, in that sense, I think a really interesting issue to bring up for people to really conceptualize it is to also stress the relationship sometimes, or the problem, like with DAF, with their dealerships. Because, of course, when you think about it, when they implemented this program, it's not just about the adoption of this whole program by their customers, but also by their dealers, because they see that they're encroaching on their business, in fact. They see you're stealing my customer. And that has to be managed. Another thing also, in the case of the agricultural firms, is like a Lely, is also with their dealers, who is the owner of the data? Is the owner, and who does the servicing of the machines? So who has actually all the knowledge? So once you start dealing with these issues, this is really important to think about.
Yeah, when I was in the car, I heard an initiative on a BNR radio that the spin out of the Amsterdam Exchange now comes with a platform where can really identify who's the owner of the data, but still share it, which is completely compatible with what you're just mentioned. Yeah.
And I think this is another important issue, at least me as an academic. I see a lot discussion also, of course, here at the EU, and so about privacy of consumers. But also, of course, in a business context, it's data security and sort of privacy, not losing your competitive advantage, or the knowledge that you have to competitors, is important. Because if you are my partner, you know all my business processes. Am I willing to open up? And in which context do you want to do that? And when don't you want to do that? So it's important to think about these issues.
Yeah, and experiment maybe.
Yeah.
To feel.
Yeah.
All right, maybe we can go to the next question.
Yes, we're ready for what is the next slide is a word cloud in the Mentimeter. It's ready for you. And we are looking for the new challenges that you foresee in the domain of system architecting. So I believe you can answer 3 topics. Let us know, and we will get back to you during the dialogue session.
Yes, so I think we can now switch to the dialogue session, answer a question or have an interview, and then maybe let's look at the results of the Mentimeter.
Good idea.
Yeah?
Shall we call in the first one with the question? I think it is Bas van der Linden.
Hi there, do you hear me?
Hello,
Hi.
Bas.
Hi, good day. From the kitchen, I still look like a Neanderthal because I'm a busy man, and even if the hairdressers are opened up, I still have to wait a bit. Hi Ed. Thank you for a very insightful talk. I learned a lot, and it's very nice to see and also recognizable. My role at CUX is actually in between this technology and the market, so I'm thinking a lot about like solutions at least. So how to what we're doing, how to translate it. What you showed also about privacy concerns. I think we maybe there's some openings from an algorithmic level. You don't need to share your data to be able to share results of analyzing that data, and I find that very challenging. And I'm also happy at CUX that we can bridge the hardware, the software, with the mathematics that's needed, and that we sit together. And I saw that one of the concerns we take away. Still have 2 questions that I feel I wrestle with after your talk, maybe even more. And the examples you showed, that's the first question. The services you show, so in servitization, it also seems to me that the company that brings these services also becomes the owner of the underlying assets that are being servitized, say. And I'm missing that a bit in the story. So in a way, you are becoming a financial institution as well, in the sense that you have to manage these assets financially. Is that part of the step that you need to make? Do you also recognize that?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And my comment also with these dealerships already referred to that. I think you have to be in a position also where to take control. I currently have a student who is working at a conveyor belt firm in the food industry. And they set as a new or planning on a new strategy where they actually take over the complete production line. And here the question is whether they are the most likely candidate to do so. Because, in fact, if one of the machines breaks down, what are they going to do? I mean, are they going to service it? Are they taking responsibility? Can they be this orchestrator in this total picture? It also reminds me of one of the shipping companies. They had a big cell of smaller vessels in the what do you call it? These Eastern European countries, and they had to set up a whole service apparatus for it. They were actually used to making one-off ships, and now suddenly they have small series. That is where you saw really in action this whole new culture that had to be created. And they hired an external service manager to create that. And actually the whole ships were redesigned after that they had already been sold. Because suddenly, of course, it made much more sense that all the nuts and bolts were similar. And not 100 types, but that it had been reduced simply to 10 types. Even if it had been over-engineered in some occasions. And they indeed had to also make agreements with the engine supplier that they could do the service on these engines, but also would have an earning on the parts of these engines, because otherwise it would not work. So it really is a complete makeover, and the question is, who can take this lead? And are you in the position, or should it be someone else? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And I also think it's good to feel. Oh.
Bas, his question, I'm also curious. What came to my mind because of Bas's question is also, I mean, the asset, also the value of the equipment is usually can be quite a lot of money, yeah? Yep. And for instance, how does Lely cope with that? That this robot they bring to the farmer is not really sold, like. I don't know what it costs normally, but they have to bear these financial assets. Is that an additional hurdle?
Well, in that case, I do think that they sell it, but they also sell the additional services. Okay. No, that's actually why they have a very expensive solution, and that gives way to, or the opportunities to these small firms like the Fitbit around the neck of a cow, because that is sold as a subscription model. Okay. And there the hardware is given away for free. Yeah. And the subscription can be ended every month. And of course, it's much more versatile for sort of small farms to use that technology rather than the Lely solution, because there the whole farm is being migrated, and people buy. And actually, the label will instruct you to say, "Oh, get rid of the old cows."
Yeah. I can imagine.
Okay but another problem that they run into is that in Holland they can sell their system very well. And they can do all the sort of maintenance and all the advice. In the US, you have far bigger farms. And they buy these robots and say, go away, Lely. I mean, we do that ourselves. We manage everything. We keep all the information inside.
Please help us to train the service.
And then bugger off. Yeah. So you really have to understand your customers. And this is also why, and of course, the setting differs. I mean, if it's more technology-driven, or like with ASML, or if it's more like with Van der Lande, that the technology is a little bit less advanced, let's put it that way. Okay. But I think that with ASML, I think that the lack of sensitivity to these different customer groups, and so starting to sell, let's say, per waiver, it's really of the engineers doing all the planning and saying, oh, it should be 13 euros, and not talking to the salespeople. Because they would immediately have said, hey, wait a minute, we have different segments of customers, and they will respond different to this proposition. So this is where you see that it's very important to have better internal coordination. Sorry.
Can I ask a follow-up question, because this is so I think feeling the pain of the customer, feeling the pain of maybe the end user of the products helps the system architecting, so we can make systems better. So that in that sense, it's very useful. But on one of your slides, you said parts are best put in a separate organization. If you do that from this pain of the customer, because then the servitization company becomes like another customer almost, no?
So sorry, Bas, we just missed a few parts of your question. So can you repeat it?
Excuse me, my bandwidth is limited today somehow. If you put the servitized parts, if you put them in a separate organization, you don't learn anymore in your system architect or in engineering part of your company. You don't learn from it anymore. So how do you set it up that it works well? So in one of your slides you said you have to best put the servitized part in a separate organization, but I think it's really useful to learn from the pains of the customer to make your systems better. So how can you guarantee both at the same time?
Yes, I understand your question. I think it depends very much on how strong the old technology can fight back. I mean, if the management is really supportive of the new technology, and if also the R&D department follows, you don't need to put it in a different organization. But in general, of course, these are new developments in the firm, and the old technology is fighting back. And we have this sort of problems that you have seen with, I don't know, Polaroid and Blockbuster. So the old business model is fighting back. That is really what is driving this comment. If the firm as a whole sees the need and wants to go this way, then you don't have to put it in a different department or as a separate project. But otherwise, you really have to protect it. And where I saw this actually happen, but I think it played out well, was with the lighting group of Philips. Because of course they had the U lamps, so well, they used to make simply bulbs, and now suddenly they had it electrified. They had actually a lighting system. And what was interesting, that actually in their pre-development, because they have development and they have pre-development, they actually have, well, that they divide their R&D investment in buckets. And actually the electronics did not get so much, was not such a big bucket. And only after a while, actually, you saw that there was more money going in there, because they suddenly realized that actually that was much more important compared to the old technologies that they were pursuing. But there you also saw, I think, a very interesting element is, as long as the LED technology was going too fast, they tried to make platforms, but it didn't work, because actually, the technology overtook them all the time, and they got frustrated. But it was funny that at a given moment, I had another student that looked also at how quickly the prices were coming down for LED lamps based on competition from Asia, and that was a sign that standardization was becoming more prominent. And there also you saw that first they launched actually these U lamps in collaboration with Apple, and they became sort of successful. And then they tried to bring it back into the organization. And I think they did a proper job in not suffocating it, because that's always the danger if you bring it back in the old organization. I think they learned over time. Yeah.
I think that's answering the questions of Bas, right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So
we have more people with questions. So shall we continue?
yes, let's first address the questions.
Yes? Okay.
Word cloud.
Yeah, we have a beautiful word cloud. I had a quick look at it. It is in really small letters for us, but it is all about, I think, customer needs, understanding the needs. It is end to customer needs. A lot of needs is what I see.
It's very fragmented.
Yes, it is. It is, yes. So not one
No.
typically, but if you combine them, you see these big data handling, service-oriented, another data handling, privacy as well. We talked about that one.
Actually, when you think of it, it's not that surprising because, you know, at the front, everything is relevant.
Yes.
And not only the functional design and the worries about the customer, but also
the complete picture.
the complete picture. So I think I understand why this is so fragmented.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
So I had a question from the chat from Tijn. You talked about risks, and the question was, what do these type of risks mean?
Okay. I think the functional risk really refers to, will the machine work? And the psychological risk is more with also the implementation included. Because, I mean, the machine can work, but if not everything comes together, you have a problem. But it could also be, for instance, I don't know, I can't remember what was all on the slide, but it can be a financial risk. So, I mean, yeah, we carefully calculated it, but I mean, if we have a pandemic or something like that, everything falls flat. It can also be a social risk in the sense that other people, what will they think of what we're doing here, and so on. So it was referring to different types of risks. But the most interesting thing is that providers sort of take for granted and think that the machine will work, and customers are, of course, worried whether things will work. And it also has to do with sometimes how they are sold. What I already mentioned, overselling.
Expectations.
Where do you see that? The first smart TV that I bought,
Yes.
it didn't function properly. I mean, it took so long. I mean, you better took your tablet to do that. Or also notice in a sort of consumer setting, maybe you also have that Ring doorbell, a video doorbell. If you look at these ads, you see happy people, and so your phone goes off, and you say, "Oh, hi! You can put my new wine from the Heer van Heusden in front of my kitchen door," and then. But that's not how it works, because before you have it out of your pocket, and because your own internet is so slow, there's a 15-second delay, and so the person is already gone.
Yes.
The other misunderstanding, and this is also where you see that people very often don't understand the customers of the customers, or exactly the situation is, we see there are people in a restaurant setting with nice candlelight, and then they say, "Oh yes, put it in front of my, or go away, you nasty burglar." But if you are sitting in a restaurant having a lovely dinner,
you don't want to be disturbed.
You don't want to be disturbed. So,
No.
so who thought up that commercial? I mean, so this is why I'm saying we should really understand our customers if we want to create solutions, and the solution has to work in the setting of the customer, and that resolves the psychological and the functional risk that they perceive. The other thing that is related to this, when you sell solutions, you don't sell it to the person at a lower level in the organization. People at a higher level, for instance, if you sell a CT scan, you can have the person at the operator, but it's probably the director of the hospital.
Will make the decision.
That says if that thing breaks down, the whole hospital has a problem. So these are really the type of things that we are referring to.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, but I feel an urge to explain that there are also a lot of positive stories to tell about servitization and what it really brings. And CX for one has one of incubators which is called Vexa, which we sell substrate carriers for the printing industry. And since we offer, that we have the ability to diagnose the system from Noonan over the world, the people so our customers get trusted because they think, okay, when there's something wrong, that at least they can take a look at it and fix it for me. Yeah. Actually, that's also what is happening. And that's, I want to emphasize that it also has a lot of benefits there. Eh?
No, absolutely. I think these fit bit for cows. I mean, if you are a farmer and you have 40 cows, it's very difficult to keep track of it. And this very simple device, by simply looking at the walk and the talk of it, and you get your alerts. Yeah. I mean, that can be a lifesaver for if they pick up on a disease of a cow or some problems with a cow very early. No, my key element is But these people really worked with these farmers and understood how to solve their issues.
Yeah.
Also, with the subscription model really doesn't tie the customer in. It's a really open situation.
Yeah.
No, so I think that's
Business to business. There, I think, to my feeling, more openings for servitization maybe than for business to consumer.
It's easier, of course, to collaborate with your lead customers, but you should, of course, be aware, and this has to do with the implementation and scale-up, work with the right, more innovative customers, and do check if you create a solution in one customer setting that it is actually representative of the rest of the market, and do make sure that the other customers are looking at this lead customer and will indeed be influenced in their adoption process because they listen to them. Yeah, so I think understanding that process is very important.
It's key.
We
Okay.
have a next question.
Yeah.
And I believe someone will be on the screen.
Okay.
So let's see if Robert is available.
Hi.
Hello,
Can you hear me?
Robert. Yes,
Hey,
we can
Robert.
hear you. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I have a question. We work also a lot for startup companies, and of course they don't have a product already in the market. We are helping them introduce their first product. So I was wondering, how viable is servitization for these startups, and if so, what should be the first steps that we do in order to make servitization for that particular product a success?
Well, personally, I think a lot of startups create solutions. So because of the software, it's for them it's simpler. I think they don't also have this transition process because this is how they start out. So that will makes everything simpler. I think the key thing is to what extent that they have sort of understand the business processes at the customer's end. And are they involving customers? So to go back actually to this Connectera example, this Fitbit of cows, they really noticed that farmers, they get together in small communities and they talk about innovations. They're almost like Tupperware parties, let's say. And they noticed that within these communities you have more innovative people. And they connected actually with a set of these innovative people. And they made a simple arrangement. They said, well, do you want to collaborate with us to further develop this solution? But if there's any problems, tell us. Don't tell the rest. Help us improve it. And then, and that's what actually they did. And I think that is also important for making it scalable. To work with a number of customers to ensure that it will be scalable in the end.
Yeah,
I'd
like to add something technical there. I think that we also, as CUX technology, so to say, need to be prepared for infrastructural questions in the context of servitization, and kind of prepare the services so that startups can kind of use them directly in bringing this solution, which already takes a lot of effort for the startup itself. But the kind of commodities that are involved, we as CUX technology could already bring, so help him out there. Yeah. And that.
I don't know. Does that answer the question, or is there an additional question?
Yeah, the additional question would be, what would be the steps for us to start with?
Well, I think it also depends on the startup. So how much do they see you as a partner or simply a supplier? If they say, I want you to make this for me, they take responsibility of what the specs are. If they see you more as a consultant, then I think your question is more valid, because that means then that you take also joint responsibility, and then I would because then you're more like an architect, and then you also have to know the customer's market.
Exactly.
Then you have to say, wait a minute, let me talk to some of these customers. You're like someone building a house for a specific audience.
So that underlines my previous statement about Kafka, the C, that we as architect, Robert, are much more involved at the front, even more than we are accustomed to right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Robert, for being in the...
Shall we go back to the first questions in the Menti? Is that, or do you want
yes,
to do...
but I find it important that we give the people who have a question a podium,
yeah.
that we don't forget them.
Yeah.
So how many?
We try to get Jacques in the live stream, but I have another question. It's from Tom H. So I think you know who it is. And his question is: should we have a Michelin star system for non-food services? And I guess it's not a joke. It is. He meant it for real.
Food services.
So like a ranking or
So as
good services, bad services, excellent services, rankings.
I think we do have that. I mean, it's called on internet these likings and so on.
Yeah.
But you see people play the system. So indeed, then there should be an official body. I'm not sure. I think that, of course, the idea is nice. But when I think about it, in a restaurant setting, it's pretty homogenized. But
Yes.
if you talk about service in general, it would be very heterogeneous. So that would ask that would require a lot of the judges.
Yes.
So in that sense, I prefer to be a judge for Michelin because I like food.
If it is possible again. So Tom, if you have any additional questions left, I would like to invite you to get into in the live stream and in the studio. And let's see. I think no other questions left at the moment.
Okay, then the
So-
90-meter thing.
Yeah, shall we go to the first question that we have asked?
right.
What is
Would
the
you like
impact?
to reflect on that?
Yeah. So what is the impact of servitization? So the
Business models, yeah, your choice.
So emerging for new business models. Yes, it's. I mean, actually, you explained it in your presentation too. So that I mean, more involvement with customers. And I also think that when technology or engineers become closer involved with our customers, then you also address new opportunities. So that's also new business, and that's so in line with.
I think it was indeed in the presentation that if you make solutions and go to performance contracts, they generally are sort of almost like new business models.
Yeah.
And I think it also relates back to one of the other questions about startups. This also explains why you see a lot of startups also dealing with a number of these sort of solutions, because it's really new technology, and they can actually create new business models and shake up whole industries.
Yeah, actually, your example was, I think, a startup,
The Connectera, for instance.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So second was new ideas for new products, so they're kind of related, so it makes sense.
Yeah, they're all related.
Yeah.
In fact, the one lowest is in fact just the technological enabler.
Yeah.
For all the ones.
For me as an engineer, I have to emphasize that it's even also very important, of course, to enable all these opportunities. And like how Robert Hendricks also explained, if we really could understand how our systems work and what could be better, that would really introduce a very nice loop, as he explains. And you need sensors there, or other, criteria to judge what's happening there.
Yeah, I think that is something that is very important. What we see, of course, is a lot of manufacturing firms that are just putting sensor in their system, but actually have not thought so well about the data that they're actually collecting and what to do with it. I also see that actually with Philips Lighting, because if I look at my U lamps, or even if I heard about projects that they have with the university, they are mining all kinds of data, and it doesn't make sense to me, because very many of the things that they find, would they have spoken just to 10 customers, they would have known.
Yeah, I would have known.
Because when I got my U lamps and I got them with my alarm system, I tried to install it. I felt like a complete idiot, particularly when I asked for the service person in a chat, because it seemed all simple. Then I spoke to someone that actually works there, has these lamps also, and he said, no, it's awful to install them, and there's quite some problems. And it's amazing how these things go. But it has to do with, well, they install all kinds of sensors, and you really have to think about that much more, and think also about the product lifecycle, because someone mentioned that also somewhere.
Again, more system engineering.
Yeah.
Maybe we could go to the next question.
Yeah, do you want a Menti question,
Yeah,
right?
the Menti question. Yes. So how will the system architect's role be affected?
Oh, this is your future work. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one who got the most.
Focus more on modular and design. Yeah.
Yeah, more modular design.
Yeah. And in that sense, in fact, it does make sense to think also about these sensors, because you want to check all these modules.
Yeah.
But it also has to do indeed the modular design, and it's not just the product; it is also the services, because they should be designed together. And so you have a product and a service portfolio, but they're intertwined, because together they create new configurations for customers.
Yeah,
so that is actually very important.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking if there was one of these criteria inside.
And indeed, the second one is, of course, to ensure product market fit. That's also what we have been discussing.
Yeah.
I think so. This people seem to agree.
That makes sense.
And by ensuring product market fit, that is actually the third one also, where you say, okay, I have to integrate marketing, sales, but do understand, it's not the marketing sales people per se, but someone has to create that product market link. And normally, of course, the role of the architect, also when you think about building a house, the architect should make sure that there's this product market fit. The only thing, of course, generally, because the architect is also with a technical background and close to the engineering department, what you see is that they say no, and because very often firms hire marketing and salespeople that are really not very strategic.
Yeah.
I see that also at the university. People still see marketing as sort of just do a PR or advertising, and not in a strategic way. But of course, when we talk about this product market fit, it's really about strategic marketing. Yeah. Nowadays, however, there's a different word for it, and that resonates more with engineers. It is called implementation science and scale up.
Yeah,
so I should change from marketing to I'm in implementation science to make science work in practice and scale up. Yeah.
I think we can talk for hours.
Yeah, so inside of time we have to
let's go to the last question. The last question that we asked at Menti. When should sales be involved in the development process? And the holistic approach has won.
Yeah.
Well, so the effect of the previous speaker has been very profound. We also saw that before. But I think it's not at the end. It should be involved earlier. Of course, nowadays we talk a lot about customer involvement, also in R&D. Yeah. But in fact, of course, it would make sense to also use more strategic sales and strategic marketing people to complement that, because I mean they are the natural interface.
Sometimes I think it's nowadays already virtually impossible to find an architect that can deal with all the aspects of Kafka, from customer to realization. This session actually confirms that you need more architect, and maybe every architect in its own strength. So at the front more the connection with customer and strategic assessment, and at the end of Kafka, more an architect which is really good into the holistic technical details, so to say.
Absolutely, because also when you think about making platforms, you have architects that look at new extensions, let's say, or new modules. Yeah. But there's also, of course, how we further develop our platform. But there's also generally that we have to think about platform transitions. So when do we move to a new platform? So for instance, also at OC, they had people at these different levels, indeed. Yeah. And they have their own requirements. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think that concludes our Menti questions.
Yes.
Is there still someone who wants to share a question?
Well, not live at the studio, but I do have one question left in the chat, if I'm correct. It's from Jacques Bruyne. What about perceived competition by service provider? And I would love to have Jacques in the studio, but he was not responding to our request.
But I don't
understand
that question. What about
perceived competition by service provider? Can we relate this to the story of Ed?
Well, I'm not completely understanding the question, but I think that service providers create these solutions to move away from the more sort of the commodity magnet, so to add more value and get better profits for their efforts, also by being closer to customers. So that is the competitive dimension of it. But but maybe he means something else. I don't know what.
No, I'm sorry, I cannot interpret the question. I don't.
Well, we get back to Jacques then after the event.
So I think we should switch to the presentation from my side, and I'm guessing that yes. Before I start talking about this slide, I want to grab something over here. Yes, to take a look in it, what's inside. Yeah, there it is. So, and of course, thank the speaker. Thank you very much for bringing up this inspiration. And based on the Q&A we had together, it's emphasized that I think it's about hot or not. I think it's really hot. CUK Technology, above all, is a very creative company with creative minds, and not only when on the field of technology, but also on the field of beers. So they brew their own beer, and I hope you like it. So this.
I grew up here in Brabant, and I think when I was 11 or 12 years old, you had to drink. I was playing in a fanfare here, because I mean, what is more Brabants and Limburgs than that?
Yeah.
And when they then ordered, there's only beer.
Okay, so here you are.
Thank you very much.
And we definitely keep in touch, not only because of the topic, but also want to know what do you think of it, the taste of it.
Okay.
Thank you again.
And thank everyone at home. Yeah.
So, then we come to the conclusion of this session, and not before I address this. There will be one episode left at the 9th of June, and then we'll talk about connectivity and interoperability. Wow, difficult word. So, there was one thing explained in the previous session, even by Professor Nijssen today, is that everything is connected. Not only information of our product, but also, the way how to design a product. There's a lot of interconnectivity going on technically and in the process. And that's what we will address the 9th of June together with Tom Pijnenburg of VDL ETG. We'll bring you this session and hope that all of you are there. If you think, what is CUK Technology actually doing in this area of system engineering and also on the topics we have addressed, just go to LinkedIn, find me there, and I invite you to connect, and we can, of course, talk in more details about what CUK Technology is doing in the area of system engineering. I think that concludes today.
Great.
Martine, thank you for the opening. The technical crew, thank you for being with us and doing such a great job. And Ed, of course, thank you for bringing such a nice keynote.
My pleasure.
See you in June. Bye.